Hello everyone, and welcome to the Honda Pro Cycle Atlantic Challenge here at Atlantic Motorsport Park for the 5th race in our Mopar Pro Superbike National Championship Series. I'm your series announcer, Frank Wood. Today's race is brought to you by Dalton Timmis Insurance, Honda, Magneti Marelli offered by Mopar, Drift, and Dunlop.
The sun is finally out at Atlantic Motorsport Park. We had rain yesterday, a lot of rain this morning in our practice sessions, our second Superbike race in a row. Yesterday, Jordan Zoke took the win in iffy conditions. Today, we have a clearing sky, a pretty green track after all the rain this morning, and a grid based on the fastest laps from yesterday's event. Yeah, you comment on that rain this morning. It was absolutely pouring when we arrived at the racetrack, but as you can see, it has cleared up. And it is, we have a dry track, but a green track, Colin, maybe a little bit slippery. Looking at our starting grid here, worth mentioning that Ernest Bernard, one of our top amateurs from last year, is here with his Yamaha R1, his second start of the 2018 season as a rookie pro. Samuel Demaray, also another rookie pro. You can see him he on the 17 Kawasaki, will start on row 3, and definitely one of the pro rookie riders that we're looking at. And yesterday we saw Jeff Williams face off against the top sport bike riders. You can see he's between Jacob Shaw O'Leary and Tremblay, who have both scored their breakthrough first Liqui Moly Pro Sport Bike wins this weekend. Then we have row 2, where of course Daly and Michael Leon had a good race yesterday, and then row 1 with the 3 fastest BMWs. Yes, Trapani, Young, and Zoke. Zoke on pole, of course. Trapani will start on the left side of the racetrack once we line them up once more, and Ben Young will have an opportunity to launch that BMW right from the center row. Coming out of the carousel here, we're going to be braking as we come up the hill. That sky shot onto the front straight, but we'll be nice and slow because we're going to be gridding up, and of course the guys at the front now, their concern is to try and get going as quickly as possible so those Dunlop slick tires do not cool off. They just came off the tire warmers, a quick warm-up lap, and want to go, go, go. We talked about Williams, he coming back into racing after being one of the top runners back in the 1990s, and an interesting story from this racetrack was that when he won here, he took the checkered flag and he took it home with him, gave it to his sponsor. He never gave it back to CSBK. And one of those unusual stories, he won here in a class that doesn't exist anymore, and he also almost won a Pro Superbike race here. He's been on the podium. Very interesting indeed. We're under starters orders right now, and we'll be underway once we get that Pro 6 cycle starting lights. There we go. The lights are starting to come on now, and of course it is when they go off that the riders will launch. They watch carefully, and we're away and running. It looks like Ben Young got a very good launch. Trapani did not get a very good start there. As a matter of fact, we're on board with Trevor Daly on the Kawasaki. He seemed to have a bit of an advantage over him at that point in time, but he's come back, Trapani, after a questionable start, just about trying to take second spot away from Ben Young on the first entry of turn 2. Well, Trapani just about took traction away from Ben Young and himself as well, and that was a close call that could have easily ended in tears with those second and third place BMWs in a heap. And actually, it looks like Daly, who was, I think, third for a bit, has been scrubbed off. He must have tried to avoid what looked like an impending disaster. On the back straightaway now, we are on board with Ben Young on the Scott-built and Barry Trim and Mold-sponsored BMW running in second spot now. And of course, the key thing is we got 4 BMWs running there, but the key thing is going to be for Young and Trapani and Leon now is to make sure they stay glued to Zoke. Don't let them get away. 9th year of the S1000RR BMW Sport Bike, and it continues to be the bike to beat in the Mopar CSBK series. Here we have 4 of them running very close together and showing plenty of performance at a track where outright performance actually isn't that important. Well, 5th on the starting grid was the big Kawasaki. Big moment for Williams there. Jeff Williams off the edge of the racetrack in turn number 1. He slid down there to the bottom of the hill. Wow, that thing was out of control, Colin. Jeff Williams was right on top of Trevor Daly, braking hard, and I think he just got in a little too hot, started chasing it, couldn't get the bike to settle down, and some people have made it across the ditch there between corners 1 and 3, but Jeff didn't quite make it that far, but fortunately he's okay. Another moment for Daly to watch that happen in front of him. So here we go again onto the back straightaway with Jordan Zoke in the race lead. We're on board with Samuel Trapani now running in third spot. You gotta love those drift cameras on the back straightaway again.
the roller coaster section of the Atlantic Motorsport Park.
And Jordan is pulling away just a little bit. He knows the tires are warm. He's confident in the traction. He has incredible track record at this very challenging 11-turn track. And now we're back on board with Trapani as he's chasing Ben Young, looking to move to second.
He came up really, really close on Young in turn number 8 onto the front straightaway. Here we go. And Young, oh man, massive moment for Young there as he was off the racetrack and then back on.
Lots of action at the front in the first few laps. It has been very hairy, and this has actually compressed the second, third, and fourth place BMWs. And at the back there, Leon must be wondering what's going on. Now let's watch here. Young coming up the hill, everything's good. You watch the bike wheelies just a bit, then he gets to the seam between the asphalt and the concrete. The bike gets a little crossed up, and he has to gather it up, and then he does a big wheelie. And I think Trapani wasn't sure what was going to happen, got out of the throttle. Normally, that would have been a great opportunity to pass, so Samuel's probably a little annoyed with himself that he couldn't capitalize.
Yeah, the unfortunate thing for the rest of these riders is the glorious opportunity was for Zoke, and he's got some major distance now after that miscue by Young.
Yeah, that definitely opened it up, and that probably half the distance Zoke has made happened right there when Young had that moment coming onto the front straight, and that is a challenging piece of the track. You're looking at nothing as you head up that hill but sky, and you need to find your reference points, and it's so easy when you're trying to put 190 horsepower down over the crest of that hill to drift a little bit wide.
Our third fastest qualifier on the Royal Distributing BMW, number 74, Michael Leon, is staying with the top 4 this time around, and staying. Here we go with Trapani having a look inside of turn number 1 on Ben Young. That wasn't going to happen, and Leon probably had the best seat in the house for that one.
There is a pass there. It's a hard one to make, and the other guy has to be a little bit wide as we look at our lap times here, and you can see we're solidly in the 8s, everybody pretty close and a little bit faster than we'd expect this early in the race. Last year I think Zoke was the only guy who got into the 7s, so good pace for all our front runners at this point, and Daly into the 9s. That's the best he's done this weekend too.
Yeah, and Leon, as you mentioned, in 4th spot there with a 108 888 to his credit. On board with Trapani once more. We're chasing after Ben Young. Now let's have a look at Ben Young, Trapani, and Leon as they are in pursuit of Zoke.
And we could see Trevor Daly just at the back of that shot. Now look at this, Frank.
Trapani to the inside of Young. He's got him. He's got a beautiful pass made there. No issues at all. Really cleanly done.
Nice move by Trapani, and he was a little bit tight, so it's slightly risky entering the carousel, but didn't seem to be any drama, and that's a good move. But now he needs to get after Jordan, or Jordan will be gone, and that's a problem we face as we start to watch the replay. Here you can see Young on his perfect line as usual. Trapani commits up the inside. At this point, Young knows he's there, so it's pretty much a done deal if Trapani can hang on to it on that tight line on the brakes. Now watch here, Trapani asking a lot of that front Dunlop slick and the front suspension of that BMW, and it works nicely, and Young is having a look at the back of Trapani for the first time this race.
You can see Samuel doing the trail braking coming in there, his fingers on the front brake, and yeah, a great job by Trapani. Now he sets off in pursuit of Zoke, and that is going to be a bit of a chore.
Most motorcyclists try not to use the front brake at all if they're turning. Here at this track, you're constantly using the front brake while turning. Since you're turning pretty much the whole time, it would be impossible to use the brakes if you had to stay away from the turning aspect. And there you can see Trapani chasing Zoke, and he tried that tight line again and maybe made a little time. And I think, Frank, that Trapani's made a lot of time in just this last lap.
Yeah, I would suggest over the last 2 laps, he's had the fastest lap time in order to make up that distance that Zoke had established after that miscue by Young. Zoke had a considerable cushion, and now Trapani, as you mentioned, Colin, has eaten it all up.
And you can see that behind these, and look at Trapani, he's thinking about the inside, because Zoke takes a pretty wide line at the bottom of the hairpin in turn 2. But behind, Young has fallen into the clutches of Michael Leon, who's having another good run with that Royal Distributing BMW.
Well, Leon putting it on the podium for the Dalton Timmis Insurance Super Pole, and it was his first appearance on that podium, and I'm sure that's kind of stoked up that inner fire that we talk up so often.
On board there briefly with Trapani as we start across the top of the roller coaster. We're looking backwards from our leader Zoke at the second place machine of the on-the-move Trapani, and all the way down this back straight, you're trying your hardest not to roll out of the throttle as the bike leaps off the bumps, and you never can be just sure where it's pointed. Then you climb up this very steep hill to the carousel.
Trapani on the move again. again, another picture-perfect pass as he's done it this time on Zoke. He did it on Ben Young 2 laps ago. Now he has the race lead. And if he had the fastest 2 laps in catching Zoke, he may be going for a ride here.
Coming up the hill for the first time, and Trapani has a clear track ahead of him, which is quite the treat. Now let's go back and watch the trip up the hill through turns 7 and 8. Zoke wheeling as he puts the power down here, but right now Trapani decides I can make it work, and once again very, very tight as he heads down to the apex here, tight on the inside, and he makes it work. Not too much drama. Of course, we're going to watch the front end, watch that front Dunlop slick as he pours it into the carousel, and just on the very edge of the inside of the track, and Jordan really can't retaliate, and now Jordan's going to be watching to see what Trapani's got in terms of pace.
Depending on the angle you were looking at that pass from, he didn't have a whole lot of room there.
There isn't a whole lot of room, and there aren't a lot of great places to pass here. Into the carousel and into turn 1 are both spooky, but can be done, and most of our front runners have done it at least a little bit this weekend. Of course, the entrance to the carousel is where Daly crashed in the Super Bowl.
Big moment for Trapani. They're Trapani just about off the racetrack, and Zoke has passed him back, or has he, as Trapani comes back. Tremendous duel now coming through the carousel, but Trapani definitely shunted back into second spot.
Looked to me like the 3rd time that Samuel had tried that inside line. He'd made 2 great passes work, and this time he takes almost the passing line on his own, and he is just asking too much of the front end of the bike. He has to get slightly off the brake, and then he has to rebalance the bike. Now, what's amazing here is he nails the throttle. If you see it from the other angle, it's more obvious, and watch here. So everything looks good. Watch the front end squirm, and then buck, and then toss him, and right here he knows he's in trouble, so he's got to use all the racetrack. Remember, it's usually a little bit dusty and slippery on the edge, but he's okay. Now right now he opens the throttle so aggressively and almost gets right back at Zoke.
Good move by Trapani. Unfortunately, it didn't quite work out, so he'll stay in second spot, perhaps gather up a bit of knowledge from that close call.
Yeah, great action there. Trapani showing a lot of ambition, making some good decisions, having a little bit of drama. Could have been a lot of drama, and I'm sure Zoke was wondering what was going to happen there and where the debris path might yield.
Zoke looks to me like he's saying to himself, okay, enough of that. I don't want anybody in front of me anymore. Let's get the heck out of here. Yeah,
time to try what he tried in the first couple of laps, and that is to get clear. And I can't emphasize enough how Jordan just doesn't make very many, if any, mistakes. Yesterday he had a problem with a knee slider that complicated his race, but it didn't keep him from winning in convincing style. And here he's trying to pull away. You can see that wide line he now uses in the hairpin at the bottom of the hill. That's not a miscue. That's what he's chosen to do. He likes the traction better there. He's made a slight adjustment that no one else has chosen to make, but it does give the sense that the door is open, which is always a risky thing.
Well, speaking of the door being open, I don't doubt for a moment that Zoke had Trapani go by, and the first thing would be going through his mind is Braveheart's probably following. Ben Young would probably be right with him, so let's get out of here.
Yeah, so far this weekend it has been Young who's been the concern. His lap times are improvement from previous. He put a lot of pressure on during Dalton Timmis Insurance Super Pole on Friday. So definitely at the moment Jordan has Young and Young's increased pace, his bigger threat, if you will, but it hasn't worked out so far here. Young has just been slightly behind.
But he's running on dimes, so he is precise, but for that miscue that we saw coming out of turn number 11, which was most unusual.
Going past the pits there over the start-finish to start the next lap, and you see your pit board. Interesting, Frank, at this track, it's tough to read the pit board because that straight isn't really straight. Your onboard lap timer is almost impossible to read. Jordan told me he tries to read it on the back straight. Sometimes he pulls it off and sometimes he doesn't. So compared to most places, most laps, you're much more alone here. You're in a battle of wits and trying to be consistent and not make mistakes, and if you make mistakes, not to lose your rhythm and lose a lot of lap time. Very easy to get into trouble here. On the other hand, people who are comfortable here, and Shaw O'Leary and Trevor are amongst them, are spectacular to watch over the tops of the hills.
Coming off turn 4, Trapani's back wheel stepping out ever so slightly, and then we went on board with Jordan Zoke looking back at Trapani, heading up towards turn number 9 right now, and I've got a sneaking suspicion Trapani's got another ace up his sleeve. Look at how close he is again.
No, he has definitely caught up over the course of this lap, and we've been watching Zoke. I haven't seen a mistake, so that suggests that Trapani has just gathered himself back up and has found his marks and is riding consistently again. But I think also Young is a little closer than he was, and Leon has now definitely faded back a little bit as we near the halfway mark.
He's still got him in sight, though, and as he's coming into one, the riders have still not entered two, so he's not too far off the mark. But the rest of the crew, as we had a quick glimpse back up into turn number one, our top four riders have definitely given some serious distance between themselves and the fifth-place runner.
By the clock, these races aren't particularly long here at Shubenacadie, but they are the most tiring races of the year. Fortunately, today isn't too hot. We lost a lot of the heat because of the bad weather we've had lately, but this is a super workout, and what's amazing, Frank, is how much steering you do with your legs. It's like a motocross race out there, and so you've got to be super fit, and it beats you up hard riding a 190 horsepower motorcycle around Atlantic Motorsport Park.
Yeah, particularly on the roller coaster, that bumpy rolling piece of asphalt that's supposed to be a straightaway, but it's got a bit of a kink in it, and as we mentioned, a number of ripples and bumps.
We had a good look backward from Zoke's leading BMW. Now we're on board with the second place BMW of Trapani. We're at the halfway mark, and as you can see, it's definitely still a three-rider race. No one has really broken clear. We've had some incidents. Really, everybody but Jordan has had some drama, but I would say, at this point we're wondering a little bit about how people are managing their tires, but we haven't seen too much that's scary. And also, it's not really hot. The track isn't holding a lot of heat, so that usually means the tires will last a little better. In our Liqui Moly Pro Sport Bike for middleweight machines earlier today, it was interesting. The top three guys all had different rear tire choices, and quite a range of tires were actually working, the slick tires around this track. So that's a good indication that Dunlop have really done well in terms of matching what the choices are for the racers with the spec tires for the venue.
Well, you go back to Trapani's mishap there when he had the back wheel sliding when he was out of control at that point of the racetrack right there. A few laps back, the back Dunlop stepping out a bit, Colin, but very predictably, and then grabbing and bringing it back in rather than whipping it back in. Yeah,
and I think that Trapani didn't panic, and that shows in his third year as a pro. He has the experience to not overreact, but that was a near thing. That could easily have been a miserable situation, and here we're coming up to some traffic.
Yeah, I was just going to say up on lap traffic now, and diving to the inside is Zoke. He is through cleanly, as is Trapani. Trapani almost had a chance to gather up Zoke with that one, and that was Oban, by the way, one of our rookie riders.
Right, on the Suzuki GSX-R 1000, one of our top amateurs from last season. Looking at our lap times here, and you can see that Trapani and Young are just slightly faster, and Leon is still setting a good pace. Daly a little bit better than last year, but at the moment fifth, and he seemed to have lost so much ground in the first couple of corners, even after a good start, that he's struggling to regain that little bit of time he lost right off the top.
Well, what's been missing from Daly's career is consistency. He just hasn't been with the series enough. He hasn't ridden enough races, and it took a bit of a hiatus from the series for a year or so. So, yeah, he's not quite as sharp, perhaps, as what the other riders are.
And, there's a lot to learn here, a lot to know at Shubenacadie. He likes the track. He's certainly a brave rider, but he wasn't here last year, and everybody else in front of him was, so that certainly helps them. And it's also worth noting that he's riding a Kawasaki, where almost all the other front runners are on BMWs.
Zoke and Trapani coming up on a slower rider in two. That is Ernest Bernard on the M1 Yamaha, rather. He moves over and allows the top riders to get through, and he stayed offline there as well so that Ben Young could get through cleanly.
Yeah, the riders are getting blue flags, so when you're going to be lapped, you see that. You don't have to move over, but at Shuby, it's not a bad idea just because it can get very, very tight. So many sections of this track are, in fact, a funnel, really, and there's not much line choice if you're going at speed.
Onto the back straightaway once more. We are on board with Samuel Trapani on the pharmacist-sponsored BMW. That's a druggist up in Montreal who owns 4 different pharmacies and has chosen to sponsor Trapani this year. That's where you get the pharmacist from.
Heading through the carousel, and I'd say this is the closest Trapani's been since he took the lead early in the race. He continues to pressure Zoke, and they're going to head on to the front straight. They're going to see their pit boards telling them that very little has happened, and they are very close together.
He is running a very smart race, is Samuel Trapani right now, and I think Ben Young's coming up to speed a little. He was a little bit further back last time around than we saw him this time, but I got a sneaking suspicion Trapani's got another pass in mind.
Well, last race, yesterday afternoon, Trapani was under pressure from Young late, and Young made something work. At the moment, it looks like Trapani has found a little more pace, and I think, too, staying close to Jordan keeps your momentum up and keeps your attention. I know it's funny to think that attention would be a problem, but getting your focus, hitting your marks, being disciplined, not kind of easing up in your mind. When you're right behind Jordan Zook, you have all the focus you need.
Yeah, and if you're waiting for a mistake, keep waiting.
Yeah, it could be a long wait. Jordan, I can think of some mistakes Jordan's made, but I've been watching him race for about 25 years, and there's not a lot of them. And, he prides himself on his tidiness, but here we're coming up on one of the locals in the carousel.
That's Corey Canfield on the 132 bike. That's a GSXR 750, if you don't mind. I haven't seen one of those on the racetrack in a while.
Yeah, Canfield certainly knows this track, knows the good line. He would have seen the blue flag as Jordan's waiting to make a move.
He's holding up Jordan.
Not really. I think that worked out okay. Trapani might have gained. No, I don't think it really helped at all.
No, it looked like Jordan was held up a bit, but obviously they're in the same position and about the same distance. However, Ben Young has got snagged in behind Corey Canfield right in the middle of turn 2, and there's no way around that.
Yeah, and that's the timing is terrible because Young was making up some ground. Yeah. And now he's lost a lot of what he's worked so hard to earn. But there may be more traffic on the, well, there is always at Shubenacadie more traffic on the horizon. And as the race progresses, they're going to start catching faster and faster riders who are harder to find a way by.
Quite so, including some of our riders on 600cc sports machines. This is one racetrack that we visit here in Canada where the 600s do have an honest shot. I'm not suggesting they could win a Superbike race, but I wouldn't be too surprised to see the right rider on the right bike put it on a podium.
Oh no, here definitely the middleweight bikes are very competitive because they're a little easier to ride consistently. The extra 70 horsepower the 1000cc bikes have is almost useless here. Yesterday we saw Jeff Williams battling with the top 600 riders, and you could see on the back straight there was little difference because most of the time most of the guys on thousands can't hold the throttle all the way open.
You just can't use all that horsepower.
Now, in a couple of weeks, we're going to be at Canadian Tire Motorsport Park, and then we're going to see the back straight dyno, the slipstream wars, all the drama that comes with that particular track, which is really, I guess, the showcase event for the series in terms of drama.
Well, if you talk to anybody at this racetrack, for instance, most of these Superbikes are putting out, I'm going to guesstimate 175, 180 horsepower, somewhere in there. But at Canadian Tire Motorsport Park, of course, they'll be getting as close to 200 horsepower as they can. And how often have you heard the phrase, I'm getting my Mosport motor ready?
Well, and Michael Leon had the highest number on the dyno Friday after Dalton Timmis Insurance Super Pole qualifying. I believe it was about 187 horsepower, which is just an alarming amount of power here. But he said he actually liked it because it gave him some gearing choices, and not only was it more powerful, but it had more mid-range. And so he thought, I'm not going to race that engine at this track, but in the end he liked that engine better, which is unusual, but shows you with the electronics and the rider's aids that are available how the nature of riding the big bikes has changed.
I was going to suggest the key phrase would be mid-range.
Well, mid-range is always fun, but too much power is still usually a lot of drama. And around here, it's like a sword fight in a closet. It's hard to get things lined up and have everything where you want it. And the other guy, maybe if he has a shorter knife, he might be able to get to you first.
Zook is getting away from Trapani again. You know, just a few laps ago, I could have cited Trapani as getting ready to launch another assault and perhaps another pass. But right now, I'm looking at Jordan Zook. Man, he rides so well. He's on dimes again. And
also, I've noticed that both Jordan and Trapani are spinning the tire and sliding a little bit more. And Jordan left a big dark line heading onto the roller coaster. But that sort of tire wear issue late in the race is another area where Jordan is very, very strong. He's comfortable sliding the bike. He's told us at times he's turned down the traction control and lit up the tire so he can steer it more with the back end. And he has those skill sets from the old days when bikes didn't have any electronics and you had to know what the heck you were doing.
Yeah, it's kind of like Rossi in MotoGP racing, you know, running the gauntlet from the old 500cc two-strokes up to the modern MotoGP bikes, having to alter his riding style and what have you to accommodate that. And this is similar to what we've seen with Jordan Zook. He won his first Superbike race back in 1998 at Race City in Calgary, Alberta, and he's been winning Superbike races here and in the United States of America ever since.
And that first race win was in the rain. Now, Frank, when they came down the hill through turn 1, just 3 turns ago, Trapani was a little bit wide and he lost a bunch of time there. So I think he's doubled the distance he's behind Zook. So that may be the decisive moment. It wasn't scary or dramatic, but he just lost lost maybe a second, and now he's a little too far back really to be considered a threat.
Yeah, he might have had words with himself after that mishap. Or miscue, I should say. It certainly wasn't a mishap, just a bit of a miscue and offline, and bingo.
Yeah, maybe we're going to have to tell the camera guys not to follow Jordan because he's not making any mistakes. We should watch everybody else because there seems to be more excitement from other places. There you can see again Jordan just spinning that tire bit. Now we're back on board with Trapani as we head up onto the front straightaway, and not much time left in this race.
We're on lap 20 now, and just 2 laps to go then as we're watching Zoke once more do his magic down in through turn 1 and lining up for turn 2 now and up the hill again. Quite a bit of elevation change here at Atlantic Motorsport Park.
Pretty much nothing but elevation change, and they say if you are good at this track, and we certainly know there are a lot of very strong locals coming up from the Society of Atlantic Racing League, then you can usually take that speed here and it translates to anywhere else, because this is one of the, according to Jordan, perhaps the most difficult track in North America. So if you have the technique and the discipline to succeed here, those skills travel.
We were traveling with Jordan Zoke and looking backwards from that BMW, trying to catch sight of Trapani, and that illustrates quite adequately just how much of a handle he has on this. However, we should note also that he is approaching a slower rider as we speak.
And we're on board, I think, with Ben Young. So the bike that we're approaching is Trapani, and Young has definitely caught up. And I wonder after that moment in turn 1 if perhaps Trapani has decided to ease back a bit. Maybe he doesn't know that Young's still pretty close, and of course Young caught him at the end of the race yesterday.
And he'll draw some inspiration from that, remembering how he did it yesterday. I'll just pull that one off again, says Ben Young.
Going to be hard to do, though. It's been a more aggressive pace, more entertaining race, if I can venture to say so. And Ben, of course, would like to be the last little bit of entertainment in this event.
And of course, Trapani's people are giving him the pit signals, so he knows full well where he sits in the approximate distance behind him where Ben Young is.
Heading to the bottom of the hill of 4 at the far end of the track, and this is when you get your courage sucked up to start down the roller coaster, because you are arm wrestling the whole way here. It is not a straight by any means. Lots of elevation, lots of bumps, and you're just trying to keep the bike pointed in the general direction of turn 7.
As you mentioned, Colin, that the riders spend a lot of time, or the Dunlop tires, I should say, spend a lot of time on the side of those tires, not so much in the center, and mostly to the right. There's only 3 corners on this racetrack that are left-hand corners.
And look at this, Frank. We're on board again with Ben Young in 3rd place, and he is much closer to Trapani. We're running out of time, but he is posing a threat. There you see the last lap flag.
One more circulation where the Ben can get the job done on this one remains to be seen. Again, he'll remember what happened yesterday, and he'll try to draw from that. He'll also remember that you can't take any points or cash away from a race that you've crashed out of.
And at this point, Jordan Zoke is thinking only about the next turn. He knows better than to let his mind wander to what he might be about to accomplish. Of course, he hasn't lost a race for over a year.
With such a large lead, and on the last lap, he's still just giving it. On board with Ben Young once more, trying to close up on Trapani. Here we come through turn number 4. And there we go through 5. The left-hander now onto the roller coaster, and away we go.
Back with our leader, Zoke. You can see Trapani in the back of that shot, and I think Trapani got the message. Young was hunting him down, so he's picked up the pace, but Young is pretty close.
Wow. Ben Young's going to be wishing there was a couple of more laps in this race, unless he can possibly catch him. I can't see that happening. We do have a slower rider coming up in front of Zoke. We're on board with Ben Young once more. Here's Zoke coming through turn 10, up through 11. The checkered flag will be waiting for him as we'll watch the 2nd and 3rd place riders. That was a lap rider there. Here we go with 2nd through Trapani, and 3rd spot goes to Ben Young. Done deal.
Frustrating for Young. He definitely kept the pressure up. That was a very disciplined ride, just short of Trapani. Both of them showing well here at Atlantic Motorsport Park. But there is Jordan Zoke, who has won his 5th straight race. Wow. There's 2 more left to run. If he wins both of those, that will be his 4th perfect season. No one has ever accomplished 1 perfect season other than Zoke.
We talk about it so often. There he goes with his stoppie, bringing the back wheel right up in the air. And our flagman, Chris Chappelle, now jamming that checkered flag post into his boot. It's been there a number of times. It's a wonder he doesn't have a special holder for it.
There you can see Zoke picks the flag out, heads down the hill, and let's have a look at our results. So Zoke, another well-judged, disciplined ride that takes the victory. Trapani threatened. Ben Young threatened Trapani at the end, but that's our second and third place there. Leon holds off Daly. Meanwhile, Jacob Shaw O'Leary is the top 600 class bike. Tremblay also doing well on a sport bike. Mitch Card on his R1 coming back from that injured foot, as we're going to look at some highlights from today's race.
Looking from Samuel Trapani's BMW, we're looking at the back wheel of Ben Young coming out of turn number 11. Watch this, he hits the concrete and then goes right off into the grass and picks up the front wheel and continues on.
And Trapani unfortunately just couldn't capitalize on that because he wasn't sure what was going to happen and where they were going to wind up. But here, what a nice move from Trapani. This was the start of several strong performances and a couple of exciting moments entering the carousel. Turn 9, there you can see, nice move, not too much drama. Now, a lap later, Trapani makes almost the identical move, tight on the inside of 9, the carousel, taking a few risks there, and beautifully judged move. But then a lap later, it gets a little more exciting. Trapani again on that tight line, and this time the front end is not happy with his choices, and he comes wide. Watch what's going on with the tire and the front suspension here, and the bike just doesn't want to cooperate, and right at this point he's not sure he can make it, but he stays with it. He doesn't panic. He keeps leaning even though he's on the wide, dusty part of the track. Now right here, lights up the throttle and almost gets Zoke back. Looking at our standings with 2 rounds left to run at Canadian Tire Motorsport Park, Jordan Zoke is looking safe atop the standings. Young could still do it, but he's going to need some luck to go his way. Trapani is solid third after that crash at the start of the year at Shannonville in practice. Leon doing well, Daly as well. Tremblay, our top sport bike class rider on a Kawasaki ZX6R Ninja.
And once again, we mentioned Samuel Desmarais, the top pro rookie. A splendid ride by that young man. Well, that completes round 5 of the Mopar Canadian National Championships in Superbike racing here in Canada. Our next stop will be at Canadian Tire Motorsport Park. On behalf of the entire CSBK crew, thanks for being with us. We'll see you at Canadian Tire Motorsport Park. Today's race is brought to you by Dalton Timmis Insurance, Honda, Magneti Morelli offered by Mopar, Drift, and Dunlop.